Physio Growth is a mastermind group targeted at the same people that you're talking about, right? Where you're looking at the very altruistic clinic owner, and they're stuck in a position where it's like, okay, but this can't keep going, right? I'm too busy. How do I how do I grow my practice, right? And how do I get bigger, and how do I get to a point that I can help as many people as possible? And I think that, like, what you're talking about is the sort of thinking that needs to happen from the leader of a company, right? But is not the sort of thinking that you want from your PT. And if they're spending their whole time treating, right, they don't have the ability to just sit and stare at the wall and be like, you know what would I do here? Or maybe
Yeah.
this, let's
Yeah.
try this out, or
Yep.
let's learn a new thing. And they have to see that education is an investment, right? That education, the best investment they can make, at least at this point, when maybe they don't have millions of dollars, is to invest in themselves and their education, be able to build themselves up, and then be able to kind of step back and say, oh, if I just, for instance, raise my prices, then a few people drop off. I get some time. I can think about marketing, and then maybe I can get more money for a bigger location. Those types of
Yeah.
day-to-day things, all the way up to what you're talking about, where it's like, how do we figure out, like, how these two worlds collide, and the EMR and the, regulation bodies and the hospitals, and we make it so that everyone comes to their PT for every sniffle, cough, and broken knee. So I think that it's important to say that, like, people are trying, right? And unfortunately, what happens is you got to get to that, almost to that burnout point, before you start looking for help.
I would agree with that last statement. You got to,
Yeah.
a lot of people right now are crying uncle before they get there, right? And the reality is, like, you can pay in two ways. You can either pay with time or with money to learn, right? And the reality is, if you're going to be, somebody who wants to make more money in the profession or do something, I think you nailed it, Paul, when you're saying, like, a lot of people where they aren't trial and error in terms of doctors and what they're trying to do, and as they're trying to go through more of the different stuff, and like that also just leads to a totally innate way of thinking that's completely opposite of what entrepreneurialism is in any capacity, right? Which is trial and error, innovating, changing. Does this work? No, pivoting. Okay, don't be afraid of failure. That guy said no. Who cares? Fuck him. Let's go on to the next one, right? Like, it's the same exact thought process of just, like, it's a bit of chaos, and then the chaos starts to build structure, and you're building structure around it, and you become just hardened to the tough atmosphere that is around there, to the point where, like, it does somewhat make you unbreakable to a certain degree. I'm sure, like, it just makes it feel much less. It's more about endurance and not quitting than it is about, like, being the most brilliant guy in the room. Unless you're Elon Musk, then it changes. But in terms of that aspect, right? But
Well, yeah, and I want to be respectful of your all's time, but I would just, I don't disagree, but I just want to, like, maybe shape what you just said there a little bit. Is that, there's a certain type of work required to get a business to start. Whether it's a tech startup, a healthcare practice, a real estate firm, it's all the same. There's a certain amount of work and brute force that's required to go from 0 to 1. The subtle but really important distinction I just want to make to just shape what you just said there, though, is that to go from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100, whatever the proverbial target is a different work. And
Totally
that's
agree.
the thing people need to understand, is because it's not about, like, that's why I disagree slightly with this idea of endurance, because like if I'm running a marathon and something's feeling off and I just grit and endure it, like, yeah, I guess David Goggins would be really happy with me, but I'm probably going to get hurt. I'm probably going to burn out. I'm probably going to regret it for the next 8 weeks.
There's a more scientific way to approach it, to your point.
Right. Yeah. Maybe, like, if, like, the smart thing to do might be to just DNF. Just, hey, you know what? Today's not the day. Or, and I'm making this up just for the sake of time, maybe it's let me change my stride or something like that. There's no good answer. All I'm just trying to say is endurance, like, I don't think is the right way to think about this, because, like, that's how you burn out. That's how you get cynical. That's how most companies. So I think the saying, or I think the statistics are, less than 4% of companies make it to $1 million in revenue. Why is that? Well, 99% of the time, I think it's because they just make something people don't want. But we're talking about medicine here. We're talking about outcomes. We're talking about, like, stuff that this isn't an innovation. This is, like, real. You don't have to prove that PT works. You just have to carve out your little kingdom. Anyway, there's something in there. We should do a show on that sometime.
Well, I think you're referencing, like, the founder's paradox, right? Where, like, you have your Uber Kalanick, right? And he was great at, figuring out how to get Uber off the ground, but then he completely botched it when he had to make nice with everyone else, right? But then the counterpoint Zuckerberg, right? Like he's made a pivot, right? Now there's arguments, is he the best possible thing? And he has a lot of ownership. Bezos, same thing. But like those are the things where I think there's ways to do it, but you got to know yourself, right?
Yep.
Can you learn?
Yep.
Can you adapt? Can you change yourself? Can you mold yourself? And those people endure, right?
Yep.
Other
Yep.
people very much know that they can't, or in Travis Kalanick's place, he gets taken over. But smart people will know, okay, this isn't my forte. I'm going to hire somebody for that. I'm going to get a professional CEO. I'm going to get some of those things. So those are the high level business decisions that, I mean, maybe the guy from Novacare has had to make prior to 1990, right? Like those are the things where you have a lot of PTs now who are making money. They have a market, they have a brand, they have all the stuff. And then they're just sitting there like, oh God, what do I do? Right?
Yeah.
Why is nobody staying when I know how to treat everybody? Why don't they know how to treat everybody? And then you go, well, there's ways of dealing with personalities, and this is how we do this and all that. And, then you make the decision if that person's good at that or not. So you're right, man. It's very much, everything changes, and it changes like freaking every week. Right. And you have to have that malleability to be able to progress.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I feel like when I say endurance, to your point, like Schreiber, it's like like not being afraid, like don't quit, innovate, and don't be afraid of certain failures and change, right? Like changing your model constantly. And I think that's kind of the idea behind like the endurance side, right? Like to your point even about changing.
Oh yeah,
it's like,
yeah, for sure.
Right? It's like
for sure.
it's like, because to your point, what I don't want, and what you are saying is, if you're doing something dumb, don't just keep doing it dumb, right? That's the definition of insanity, doing the exact same thing and expecting a different result, right? It's like, how do you continue to push the ball forward? How do you finish to innovate, right? How do you change what you're trying to do? And I think not being afraid of doing that is a huge piece of it. Fear is
That's
a
right.
massive, massive barrier that most people have as an obstacle that they can't overcome. And
That's
so it's
right.
like, how do I change my thought process? How do I innovate what I'm doing? How do I keep my passion and have a business out of it? Why can't I have both things, right? Why
Right.
can't I have my cake and eat it too?
If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo.